Oh, I never would have thought of being governor. It was beyond my wildest dreams.
Leaders.
Your mom's a pretty big influence in your life, and it had a way of helping you set priorities.
Pioneers.
That was before I ran into all my friends and family and beyond who said, you'd be an idiot to buy it.
Groundbreakers.
I mean, there's that joke, there was a fork in the road, and those who could read the sign went north to Oregon.
History makers. This is a special presentation from KGW News. Oregon History Makers.
How do you define greatness? Here in Oregon, it's all around us. There's a majestic beauty in nature, of course, that can't be denied. But there's something special about the people. I'm Joe Donlin. This holiday and all year round, KGW celebrates Oregon history makers. History makers like Barbara Roberts, Oregon's first and only woman governor. Growing up in Sheridan, she never expected to go to college, much less win election to the highest office in the state. But one experience changed everything. Pat Doris has the story.
Hi, how are you? Wonderful.
Barbara Roberts today is the picture of success.
Ladies, you ready for your close-up? No.
A sought-after speaker, close enough to dance with industry titans like Columbia Sportswear's Gert Boyle. The two recently appeared at a luncheon to raise money for Girl Scouts, an organization she joined more than 60 years ago. Roberts told the crowd her view of the world began to shift when, as a little girl, she researched women in history for a Girl Scout badge.
It literally changed my life by showing me that women could do important things. They could speak out. They could literally change history, like being governor. It certainly opened my eyes as a small-town girl about the potential for women in the future, that you could actually speak up and you could change things. And it was with me forever.
The future governor grew up in Sheridan, Oregon, at a time when society told young women to get married, have babies, and live happily ever after.
I was salutatorian of my high school class, and nobody ever suggested I go to college. No one ever said, you should go to college, you're kind of smart.
Despite her glimpse of a possible future, Roberts followed the script that guided so many others at the time.
Oh, I never would have thought of being governor. It was beyond my wildest dreams. I couldn't even imagine, serving on a school board. I mean, being a business owner. I just couldn't think in those terms because, as they say, you can't be what you can't see. And I never saw a woman doing anything like that.
Then, something happened on the way to happily ever after. His name is Mike.
When Mike was 6 in the first grade, they sent him home from school and said he could never come back again. That's what happened to lots of children with disabilities.
It may have been common, but it was not acceptable to Barbara Roberts. Her son had autism, and she was ready to fight for him.
And I just got so angry about it. It was like the mother bear syndrome that people talk about. My son had the right to an education. I knew he was smart. Even with his disability, I knew he was smart. And I wanted him to be educated.
She became a one-person lobbying machine. Now a divorced mother of 2, she took every Friday off from work for 6 months to urge lawmakers to do something.
It was one of those things where I just had enough. And I was so determined that I literally, that legislative session, met with every member of the State House and every member of the State Senate. I met with all 90 members of the legislature, and I testified in front of, I think, four committees. I was this little housewife from East Multnomah County. I'd been in the Capitol building once as an 8th grader. So I walked in knowing nothing and came out with this successful piece of legislation for children.
The new law required the state to educate kids with special needs. The experience showed Roberts she was good at politics. It also introduced her to Frank Roberts, her legislator. They fell in love and got married. Roberts went on to serve on a school board, the legislature, then became Secretary of State. Despite her political titles, she still thought of herself as simply a mother and wife.
My image of myself was very slow to change.
She got a big boost at a Harvard leadership conference.
And here I was, the second highest office holder in Oregon. And a word I would have never used about myself was leader. Nobody called women leaders. they talked about males as leaders. And I went back, and at the end of the first couple of weeks of that program, I understood among the 60 or 70 people in this class from all over the country that I was a leader among those people. And that's when I came home and re-examined who I was. That's when I started thinking that maybe someday I'd like to be governor.
That day arrived January 14th, 1991.
And I will faithfully discharge the duties
of the office of governor.
But even as governor, she found men excluded her in some circles.
I think there's some places, at least a number of years ago, where you don't have as much access as males do. If you don't play golf, you're not out on the golf course with the people who are kind of movers and shakers. And there's some places you don't get invited because you're a female.
After one term, she decided not to run again. But Governor Barbara Roberts has never really retired, and she's still keeping tabs on her son Mike. He's now 58 years old and lives 1 mile from her.
He lives in his own apartment, does his own shopping, his own cooking, and pays his own bills, at least in terms of writing the checks. And he's an awful cook. He's just a terrible cook. And he's a terrible house cleaner. And so, but the cooking I gave up on, the house cleaning occasionally I help with.
She's proud that he speaks 2 languages and manages life on his own.
We have
the former governor is also busy, speaking and encouraging Oregonians, especially women, whenever she can.
I think nobody knows better what it's like to hold a job and raise a family at the same time and do all the things we try to do and hopefully do well. Nobody knows that better than women who are doing it. So if they can step forward and be the person who assists somebody who's working to finish their college degree or who's trying to get their house painted or whatever they're trying to do and they could use a little assistance, we do best when we help each other. It's kind of like the old-fashioned quilting bee. The quilts were big and beautiful because women worked together.
She is disappointed another woman has not led the state in the 20 years since she left office.
Yes, I would like to see that happen. I hope it happens within the next decade. I think it will.
In the meantime, she's proud to be an example for those who will follow.
It keeps your ethics strong and it makes me drive under the speed limit. But
the little girl from the small town who glimpsed heroes in history books is now one herself.
Barbara Roberts served as governor from 1991 to 1995. At that time, she was only the 10th woman to serve as governor in the country. She is 78. Coming up next, until there's a cure, there's treatment. You'll meet a doctor at Providence, Portland, who has dedicated his life to making it work for his patients.
And right outside the store, they had a bunch of tulips, which is my wife's favorite flower. And just struck myself, who's going to buy her tulips? And I know her children would, but it's not the same.
How he gives cancer patients the gift of time while leading the relentless search for a cure. That's when our History Makers special continues. This holiday, there are families coming together thanks to this history maker, Dr. Walter Urba, the Director of Cancer Research at Providence, Portland. His life and his work are dedicated to finding a cure. But until then, his innovations are giving patients something else, treatments that buy them time.
So explain to me what it is.
As Dr. Walter Urba walks through the lab at Providence Cancer Research Center, he can take satisfaction in knowing he helped build this operation essentially from the ground up over the past 2 decades. In a city where the hospital on the hill likes to grab headlines, Urba has put Providence on the map.
So when you go back and work with the scientists in the lab and the physicians who are part lab, part doctor, it's just an incredibly intellectually stimulating environment.
Urba may collect accolades for his work developing cancer treatments, but he still draws passion from working with individual patients.
It's a wonderful journey to be on with patients. It's a wonderful outcome to share.
So there's the reason to live right there.
Mark Hornibrook sought out Urba when he was diagnosed with cancer.
I was diagnosed with metastatic melanoma on February of 2012.
When Mark first met Dr. Urba, scans of his body looked like this. Those dark spots are tumors.
Tumor here, tumor there, 6 tumors in the muscle tissue around here, innumerable tumors in both lungs. This play.
The cancer still lurks in Mark's body, but thanks to treatment from Dr. Urba and his team, the tumors are gone.
Dr. Urba impressed us, one, as a very caring, comfortable person to be with, and probably most important, he knew the latest of whatever was going on in the industry. Do you want to go up the path?
Mark's initial prognosis was not good. He was given, at most, a year to live, but realistically, he was told to expect maybe a few months. Just 60 years old, he made peace with the fact the end was near, and his large family would lose its patriarch. His wife Anne, however, could not come to terms with her husband's disease and urged him to fight.
You know, I remember walking into a grocery store, and right outside the store they had a bunch of tulips, which is my wife's favorite flower, and just struck myself, who's going to buy her tulips? And I know her children would, but it's not the same. And then thinking about the grandchildren and not having that time to play with them and build things together and swing together, it just, so.
Over the past 2.5 years, Dr. Urba has guided Mark and his family through a series of treatments. Each successful treatment buys time.
You're doing it.
And when it comes to cancer treatment, time is the best currency.
Lean back. Dr. Urba is just saying stall, stall, stall. You know, the longer you can stall, the better the chance you have of getting a drug that's going to have a high percentage chance of cure.
Even in the months since Mark started his most recent treatment, a new, more promising drug is already in use.
One that Dr. Urba and his team, again, have been through the clinicals with, and they were part of the type of research, the immunotherapy. It is an immunotherapy drug, and it's a new one that's come out. And instead of that 6% cure rate, now we're talking 25 to 35% cure rate.
There's not much greater reward than being able to provide a treatment regimen that leads to the ultimate success, which is cure of the patient with cancer.
Urba's path to Providence started with a phone call in the early 90s.
When they first called on the phone and said, gee, we want to do some research, I had this vision of a small lab with a Bunsen burner and a hospital administrator thinking that was a lab and you could do cancer research there.
But what he found was a real lab and a real commitment to world-class cancer research, including the budding field of immunotherapy. Urba's motivation to grow the cancer center can be traced back to his mother, who battled breast cancer for decades.
You know, your mom's a pretty big influence in your life, and it has had a way of helping me set priorities.
For Urba, those priorities include always being straightforward with his patients, even when the news is bad.
Watching her go through the anxiety, I think it's made me call patients back sooner. It's made me respect to a much higher degree what's going on in their lives at home.
He's always quickly responding. When he finds out what's happened on a test result, he emails us right away.
Urba's work in the lab and with patients helped lead to breakthroughs in treating melanoma and other cancers.
They've been working on immunotherapy since the early 90s, and it wasn't popular then. Now it's seen as the direction for the cures.
Urba is often praised for research breakthroughs, but when asked what he finds rewarding, the doctor is quick to talk about his individual patients.
It's obviously a great day when you look at that x-ray in a patient who's been fighting really hard for their disease, and you put that x-ray up there and their tumor's gone. Hard to get a better day than that.
Dr. Urba talked about his mom. He calls her his inspiration. He says every time he makes a decision about the Providence Cancer Center, he asks whether it would pass the mom test. Coming up next here, when he first envisioned a golf course on the southern Oregon coast, everyone told him it would never work. Now Bandon Dunes is considered one of the best golfing experiences anywhere. It's made the town of Bandon a destination for golfers worldwide. And this history maker says he's not finished yet. If you've ever had a hunch, maybe a big idea or a big plan, you know just how Mike Kaiser felt the day he decided to buy a piece of property just north of the town of Bandon. He saw promise in a slice of Oregon known as the Forgotten Coast. What grew from there is pure gold. I sat down with the entrepreneur whose big dream made history not only for the state, but for an entire industry.
My take on the South Coast, because that's where I've been, is it was pretty much the forgotten coast before I arrived. So if I've put the forgotten coast back on the map, that's, I think, a little bit of Oregon history.
That is an understatement, but it seems par for the course for Mike Kaiser, the soft-spoken and humble man who created and built what has been ranked as one of the best golfing experiences in the world, Bandon Dunes. After building a course in Michigan in 1985, Kaiser started looking for oceanfront property on the East Coast, an impossibility, he says, so he shifted his search west, looking in California. His friend and longtime Portland resident Howard McKee told him he should look along Oregon's beautiful coastline. So he did, and in 1989 he got a call from a realtor about a 1,200-acre site on the South Oregon coast with huge rolling sand dunes and Scottish broom. To Kaiser, it sounded perfect. He flew to Oregon, and 1 week and $2.5 million later, the land was his and the real work began.
Because it was such an exciting course and such a natural, I knew I was going to buy it. That was before I ran into all my friends and family and beyond who said, you'd be an idiot to buy it. No one's going to go there and play golf.
To anyone else, that might have been a deterrent, but Kaiser had rolled the dice before and hit it big. In 1971, the first year of Earth Day, he, his wife Lindy, and a college roommate had an idea for a greeting card business.
Our business plan was to find 100% recycled paper, find artists, find a printer, and sell them. We had no idea what we were doing. We started in the yellow pages looking for artists.
What they found was that everyone wanted to help. Paper companies gave them their old Christmas cards, and then they found a young artist named Sandra Boynton.
She was looking for a publisher. We were desperate for someone who knew what she was doing, and America loved her things. Our sales went from 2.5 to 100 million in 7 years because of her.
With money in his pocket, he set out to feed his lifelong passion for golf by building a world-class course using a combination of the ocean, the sand dunes, and the best architects. In 1999, the first course, Bandon Dunes, opened to the public. Kaiser says they had a pool going on how many rounds would be played in that first year. His guess was 10,000, simply because that was the number he needed to break even.
Most of the betting was less than 10,000 rounds. So that's what we knew. That was friends, family, experts. Probably the people in Portland would have said about the same thing. And we were all stunned, there's no other way to put it. We were just astonished that the first year we did 23,000 rounds. We had a lot of publicity, and it's, you know, you've been to the South Coast. It's probably the most gorgeous part of America.
So there was a time where you looked at this and asked yourself, is this going to work?
Right up till opening day.
The tee sheet was full. Bandon was born, and Kaiser was just getting warmed up. A second 18-hole course, Pacific Dunes, would follow in 2001. Golf Magazine ranks it the #1 public course in America, ahead of even Pebble Beach. He had dreamed of building 2 courses at Bandon, saying 1 is a curiosity, 2 is a destination. But there was more to come. After Pacific Dunes, he added a 3rd course in 2005, Pacific Trails, and the man with the magic touch found an interesting thing about the financial formula.
1 + 1 = 3 in terms of revenue. Then when we built the 3rd course, it's 1 + 1 + 1 = 7.
So why not build another? They had acquired the site for a 4th course on the property called Old McDonald, and Kaiser's golf paradise at Bandon Dunes had blossomed to 3,000 acres. But there's still more. You know you're doing something right when you build a golf course with 13 holes, and it's wildly popular, a par 3 course called The Preserve. Kaiser gives all the revenue from that course to clean economic development and conservation on the South Coast. There's another par 3 course on site, plus the just opened Punch Bowl, a 100,000 square foot putting course. And now plans are in the works for what Kaiser calls Bandon Municipal Golf Links, just south of the town of Bandon. Coos and Curry County residents will pay significantly reduced greens fees. And like all the Bandon courses, the caddy program will be robust. That's one of the things Kaiser is most proud of. Not to mention the fact that he's done all this in a state that cherishes its environment with barely a peep from opponents. Even artists, I'm sure at some point, put the brush down and say, I'm finished?
It's too much fun. I like to say I'm going to keep building golf courses till I run out of money.
His work in Oregon will go down in history as one of the greatest golf facilities ever built. Spectacular but understated clubhouses with restaurants and quaint pubs and almost 200 rooms tucked inland. Golfers come from miles and worlds away to walk with caddies, no carts, no houses, no real estate lining the fairways. As their slogan says, just golf as it was meant to be. Fast forward to now, when you walk on that property, what do you say to yourself?
I'm astonished. I don't, it's because of our skepticism that it would work from back when, 1999. That will always be with me as beating the odds big time.
Mike Kaiser loves the game of golf, plays about 70 rounds a year, but being a visionary for the sport doesn't necessarily make you a pro. He says he's okay, plays to around a 10 handicap, right between par and bogey golf. That's pretty good. Coming up next, he started dabbling at the piano in his father's church. Now his message and its infused music is enjoyed by millions.
This country would be a much different place if we sang together regularly.
When our program continues, how Pink Martini's Thomas Lauderdale became a history maker and the mark he hopes to one day leave on Oregon. You don't have to be a history buff to know the work of this history maker. Thomas Lauderdale is the band leader of world-renowned musical group Pink Martini. As he put it to Catherine Cook, his music is driven by a lifelong desire to make a difference.
Portland is full of surprising, beautiful combinations. You'll find them in food carts, at breweries, and in a 6,000 square foot downtown building turned home. Here, you'll find Thomas Lauderdale.
Who can resist a beautiful melody?
The most beautiful combination of them all. Musical icon, political activist, history savant.
Yeah, the artwork is a hodgepodge. This was an Oregon author named Ardith Kennelly.
Like Thomas's art collection, his band, Pink Martini, sort of imitates life. Thomas's life, a multicultural blend of music and love. It began with Thomas's adoptive parents, Kirby and Linda Lauderdale.
My parents then went on to sort of adopt a rainbow tribe of children. I was the first. I was born in 1970 in Oakland, California. My brother, Aaron, who's Iranian, was born in 1972.
In rural Indiana, the family spent much of their time together in church, where Thomas's father was a minister.
And I would go and play the piano sort of after church services, and I would sort of pound out the hymns that were played during the service. And so my parents thought that I should start piano lessons, so I started at the age of 6.
Thomas's love for music flourished, fostered by teachers from Purdue to Portland, where his family moved when Thomas was young.
I mean, there's that joke that there was a fork in the road, and those who could read the sign went north to Oregon.
At Grand High School, Thomas was student body president, editor of the school paper, and won the Oregon Symphony's annual Corbett competition. That's where he met the late, great conductor Norman Layden, who'd go on to mentor Thomas and even collaborate with Pink Martini. Thomas's summer jobs were at City Hall.
And so I worked for Bud Clark when he was mayor. I worked on the Neil Goldschmidt campaign for governor. I worked on the Dukakis campaign.
A few years ago, Thomas bought the coat that Clark wore in his Expose Yourself to Art poster.
This used to belong to Governor Bowerman in 1904.
Thomas would like to be mayor of Portland one day.
I would love to. I would have to write the tell-all book first.
Thomas went on to Harvard University. There, he studied history, literature, and met Pink Martini singer China Forbes.
Hey Eugene, do you remember me?
The band itself was born in 1994 out of political necessity, as Thomas tells the story. He'd just flown the Del Rubio triplets to Portland to help with a political campaign after watching them sing on Pee Wee Herman's Christmas special.
So I brought them to do a series of concerts in nursing homes and hospitals and retirement homes and the occasional Rotary meeting.
Sugar and spice, I feel nice. Sugar and spice.
And then they would sneak a vote no on 13 message at the end of their little set. And at the end of the week, we had a big concert at Cinema 21, and I couldn't get a hold of the surf band that I wanted to open. And so I threw on a cocktail dress and started Pink Martini. That's how it started. And it was, it was supposed to be a one-time thing, and then suddenly we began playing for every progressive cause in Oregon. The environment, libraries, Oregon Public Broadcasting.
Global success followed, including top-selling CDs through the band's own record label.
Suddenly we released the first album, and it took off in France. And so we actually had a career first in France. And I feel like half of the work that the band does is really ambassadorial. We spend time in different countries singing songs in the languages of whatever country we're in.
Pink Martini's fame grew, from Christmas sing-alongs at Pioneer Courthouse Square and concerts at the Arlene Schnitzer Concert Hall to sold-out performances at Carnegie Hall and The Tonight Show.
When you come out of that
Their latest venture is a collaboration with the Von Trapps, who on this day came to rehearse.
Dream a little dream of me.
As Pink Martini grows, its roots remain firmly planted in Oregon, as do many of Thomas's dreams.
What I would love to see happen in Oregon is a restoration of all the arts programs in every public school across the state.
Thomas's history is rich, and his future promises more of the same. He played a preview for us, an unreleased recording of the hymn, How Great Thou Art, surfer style. Another one of those surprisingly beautiful combinations we talked about that make people stop, smile, and hopefully sing along.
This country would be a much different place if we sang together regularly. A country that doesn't dance or sing is deeply in trouble.
The Oregon Historical Society recognized the accomplishments of the history makers you just met tonight with a dinner earlier this year. It was a great evening. They're currently accepting nominations for 2014. Eligibility is open to anyone with ties to Oregon who represents the best of what the state has to offer. Thank you so much for joining us. For all of us here at KGW, I'm Joe Donlan. Happy holidays.